Okay, this is lesson number 50 of a workbook of A Course in Miracles. Um, I am sustained by the love of God. And I'm going to say something about this lesson. This is perhaps one of the lessons that the ego loves to interpret. And the ego loves to use everything against your ability to do it truly. And I want to remind you that the ability to do this lesson in a way that has efficacy, in a way that actually works, is to take the lesson as it is. Just read it. While you're reading, and of course, when you read it, I am sustained by the love of God. Let's take a couple of lines and I'll show you what I'm trying to say. I am sustained by the love of God. Here is the answer to every problem that confronts you today, tomorrow, and throughout time. Now, of course, to the ego in you, to the thing that objects in you, I'm going to call it the ego, to the thing that objects in you, and the thing that uses your faculties to prove the objection is true, the body's eyes. So remember, the ego was initially referred to as eyes of the body by Jesus, and the Holy Spirit was initially spoken about as your spiritual eye. Okay? Now, the ego, which is the voice of objection, and always speaks first, of course, would have to, because it's objecting, is going to use this lesson. Here's that, okay, that's a nice idea. Here's the answer to every problem that confronts you today, tomorrow, and throughout time. Okay. In this world, you believe you are sustained by everything but God. Your faith is placed in the most trivial and insane symbols: pills, money, protective clothing, influence, prestige, being like the right people. And somewhere he's going to include food and everything you think you need and that to sustain you. And the ego is going to try to either thwart your attempt to pierce the superficial offerings that the ego gives you, which is what this lesson is saying. The ego is attempting to prevent you from piercing the superficial nature of what's being presented by keeping you on the surface thinking about all these things, to prevent you from going to where you actually are sustained by the love of God. And what this is going to say is you can't get there without making the decision. And the decision in an instant is where you recognize in some form in the world that you are investing the ability for that to sustain you. You are investing your power of mind in the ability that to sustain you. And in that instant you see how that renders you powerless and a victim of everything and anything. So if you can catch it at any one thing, and this is why I really like the lessons, and we've been talking about this, and we talked about what I did. When you do the lessons the way the lessons are offered to you to do, this is saying twice today, in the morning and evening, let the idea for today sink deep into your consciousness. Repeat it, think about it, let related thoughts come to help you recognize its truth, and allow peace to flow over you like a blanket of protection and surety. Let no idle, foolish thoughts enter to disturb your holy mind. Now, number one, he's saying in there's nowhere where he's asking you to deny that you do believe all these things to sustain you. You're sustained by everything outside of you. You're not being asked to deny it and reject it, okay? To resist it, to object to it. You're asked to recognize it, because in the recognition of that fact is the restoration of the power to you. Okay, what this is saying is You have given over your power to all these things, and they have power over you. When you recognize that you think there's what's sustaining you, you now have come into a truthful moment in its right relationship with yourself and your own power of your mind and the world, and now you can change your mind. And that could happen in any instant, but it can't happen until you see the dynamics at work within your own heart and mind. Because otherwise it just becomes, you become, this is really, I don't know if I can express this. As much as you are a sheep to the world and follow behaving the way it wants you to behave, thinking that you're sustained by all these things, you too can become a sheep to this mindlessly without the utilization and the implementation of it at a point where it can make a difference. I am sustained by the love of God. And then you can go into a conceptual discussion with somebody else saying, well, I know that's just me. That's my body that does that. My soul and reality is here. And I'm not really because I know I'm that. No, somewhere in time, you have to demonstrate to yourself and to the universe that you trust in this principle by seeing in something that you've given it power over you and you think it sustains you. And you say, wait a second. I am the one who did that. It's not in that. The power is in me. Now a real decision can be made, and now an implementation. The problem is the ego is always going to tell you that, okay, if you are sustained by the love of God, then you don't need all these things and stop eating. That's not what this is actually saying. It's presenting to you the dynamics of the way your psyche works and has been working in order so that you can change your mind. You have an overview that you operate within in order to see an instant of what this is saying within the framework, to see how it's generalized to everywhere else, and then in any given instant, when the reflection comes back to you in the moment where you recognize, oh, I did that, now a decision can be made that can empower you and disempower everything you previously thought was sustaining you. And in that instant, the grace of God steps in and shows you who you really are. Now, you could learn. Do not put your faith in the worthless. It will not sustain you. Only the love of God will protect you in all circumstances. Okay, how else is that going to be true unless you are put into circumstances wherein which you need to apply that in order to demonstrate the truth of it? Otherwise, it's just an empty concept. It's like every other concept that the sheep follow in the world. Never examining it for the truth, never examining why, never really looking. Who told me I had to do this? Who told me I had to believe this way? Okay? This is what this lesson is. Not put your faith. It will transport you. It will lift you out of every trial and raise you above all perceived dangers of this world into a climate of perfect safety. And you're going to learn how, through the integration of this principle based on the forgiveness of your own mind, you're going to learn how to utilize your spiritual eye to see right through the illusion so you're not fooled by it. And you will come to learn in situations the proof of you not being fooled by it, because you'll enact this in a way, and you'll listen, you're going to learn, and then you're going to do something to correct the error in your mind. And that will generalize to the max ability for you to allow it to generalize, basing what you can let go of as what's been sustaining you. Put not your faith in illusions. They will fail you. Put all your faith in the love of God within you, eternal, changeless, and forever unfailing. This is the answer to whatever confronts you today. Okay, so the ego will try to do this lesson by not allowing anything to confront you today. When absolute awakening is a constant confrontation with your own thoughts, based on the perception of what you've previously projected out of you. So what this is saying is, until you actually do come to the admission that you have thought that all these things sustain you, this lesson is absolutely of no efficacy. You can practice it, and this is what I'm trying to say. When you're doing these lessons in a way that gives over any amount of willingness, because you've recognized the value in the shift in perception and the change of mind that you're being offered. When you do them the way they are offered to you, the thoughts that you put into your mind is what orders the events and the space and time that you seem to occupy. I wish it, because you don't really. I'm laughing because you don't really occupy or even move around in space and time, as this is a dream within our minds and not outside of us. But we have to start somewhere, and we have to start with the simple admissions we're willing to turn over to the Holy Spirit. So I am sustained by the love of God. Remember, please, that all of these lessons are designed to help us open our mind by putting us in a safe enough environment where we for an instant can trust, okay? When our minds are finally trained and open, we begin to get the directions that allow us to fulfill our individual function in this seeming sojourn through space and time, okay? It's that voice that will offer you the instances to help you recognize when something is up for you. It'll order your day, and then it'll say, up here, watch. Watch with me. And when we watch together, the Holy Spirit and I, you and the Holy Spirit, your mind is vigilant for the truth by not rejecting those obstacles and blocks to it, but simply by seeing them for what they are and have been, and allowing them to disappear in the light of the joint willingness that we've offered, with our willingness joined with the Holy Spirit's willingness that we've offered for this purpose. It's not to blind us to the blocks. It's to allow us to see the blocks in a way that doesn't make us fearful any longer or guilty, and utilize what we're seeing to heal our minds so that we can recognize that our being has always been, always will be, and still is now in the kingdom of heaven, where we are sustained by the love of God. When we become like Jesus, the love of God becomes the motivating and, how should I say this, power behind the illusion that we can learn to cooperate with, so as to show us in the simplicity of our own mundane lives that the willingness to allow God's love to be our sustenance brings us an abundance that can't be found. And in fact, the ego is a defense against. Poverty and wealth is ego's defense against the abundance of God. Both poverty and the hoarding of wealth are the ego's defense against the experience of the abundance of God and the currency of love as being that which sustains us.